The trusty old dot vote. I don't know if you remember how we used to walk around in workshops with little round stickers, and then used to indicate our votes by sticking these little round dots on the sticky notes on walls. Now you can do this right here in Mural, much easier and a little bit easier to audit. Now, how do you set up a voting session? And perhaps the first thing I need to do is point out where the voting feature sits within the Mural navigation bar. So if you go up to the facilitation tools at the top here, you'll see that you have your dot voting element right here, and you can start your voting session. What I have done though is I prepared a little area, because the other thing that you need to keep in mind, and this is the most important thing to keep in mind as you set up a voting session within Mural, is that imagine yourself to be in a real world workshop space, and you're giving someone a sticky little round dot and you tell them to go vote. If you don't give them instructions or guide them, they can basically vote in anything, on the biscuits, the coffee cups, on the whiteboards, and perhaps a few will land on the ideas or the context that you want folks to vote on. So the most important part, or the thing that you need to focus on the most when you set up a voting session, is actually defining the area that you want people to vote on. As mentioned in some of the other videos, that these areas can become quite large. Now, what I've done here, just to give you an example, is I've prepared a little area with a few different elements on it to show you how I set up a voting session. Now, you can vote on most elements within a canvas. In this example, I really want folks to actually go in and just vote on the 3 ideas that I've laid out here. Now, how do I set up the voting session? First thing is I go over to dot voting and then say start a new session. Click to open that up, and then a little drop down opens up with a whole bunch of kind of features and data and metadata that I can add. First, what you want to do is perhaps you want to add a name for your voting, because you can go back and review some of the votes that happened in the past within a session. So I'm going to go voting round 1. Then you can also assign the amount of votes you want a person to have. So if you have a kind of design sprint background, or maybe design thinking, sometimes what happens is you want to give people multiple votes because they want to maybe prioritize certain things, have the ability to vote multiple times for something, depending on your use case, of course. Then the next area down here is that who do you want, or who can end a voting session. So when you set up a voting session as a facilitator, for the most part with this ticked, you as a facilitator will set up the vote. Remember, when the system goes into a voting round, a user can't do anything else. But you can also set up a session where any member can end the voting session. However, for the most part, in most use cases, you would want the facilitator to have the ability to end the voting session. Something else I need to point out here in the functional side is that you can start a voting session and actually leave the canvas. You can leave a voting session open for a couple of days if you want to. It's only once the facilitator comes back and then ends the voting session that the voting session will stop, unless, of course, you select any member can stop the voting session. Now, the next thing is where I kind of started talking about is where and what do people vote on. So the first level is to decide on which elements do you want a sticky dot vote to land. So you have a whole list of different components that are available to you in Mural, and you can select on which of these elements and which elements don't you want people to vote. What I usually do is I just go and clear the selection, and then I select the element. So I try and peer. I can't really see the canvas at the moment, but if I add sticky notes to the list, you'll see that everything grays out, and then I have sticky notes here. All the sticky notes are visible. It's kind of a visual indicator telling you that people can now vote in that element. Just to give you an example that this really works, I'm going to activate icons as well. So this means in this case, people can put their votes on my little hamster and other hamsters, or on the 3 ideas, which I don't want to do now. The other element that is really interesting that I use a lot is when you create clusters. So let's say you create a group of ideas and you want people to only vote on the groups, not the individual ideas. This is where you would use areas, and you can deactivate the sticky notes and then say, I only want people to vote on the areas. And you'll see that the area there at the back and the other area is now active, and people can vote on only the areas. So cluster 1 or cluster or idea group 2 that you want them to vote on, you can have multiple of these areas, of course, available. In this example, I'm just going to make sticky notes votable again, and you'll see it comes back into focus. Now, the other thing that you need to keep mind of is the last feature or parameter here is where to vote. Now remember, I've now zoomed into this area on the canvas. Of course, there might be more sticky notes, there might be more things on the canvas, your templates might be more complex. So if I just start the vote now, people can vote in any other sticky notes. What I want to do is I want to only vote to happen in a selected area. So therefore you have the two options. You can vote on the entire canvas, maybe all the ideas and concepts are the canvas, or maybe there's a lot of other things there. Then you want to go and actually do a selected area. I'm going to do the selected area, click on that, and then click next. Now you're nearly ready to start the vote. You have to, however, come in and define the area you want the vote to happen in. You have this blue bounding box that you can see here. You grab the area, you can now scale it up and down, and it gives you a bit of an instruction here of what you need to do. And I only want people to be able to vote on the stickies. Now this example is very simple. I don't actually have to use the area because I've only selected the sticky notes. However, outside this frame there might be more sticky notes you don't know. I want people to vote on those 3 ideas. Now once you're ready, you'll see that there's indication. You have 5 votes per person, and I really want to start the vote. You click the start button over here, and the system will think about it a little bit. Sometimes take a couple of seconds just to activate. I'm going to start the vote right now. That was fast. So now what will happen is you'll get this little pop-up here. And once you've clicked that as a user, other people has also received this pop-up. You go into begin the vote. It zooms into the area you want to vote. And now I can add a vote by simply just clicking on the idea that I think is the best. You'll see a little indication pop up showing that I've actually voted on this element twice. For example, I might have another user in another screen actually adding more content. I have an example here. So for example, I'm adding some extra votes here by another user, which you can't see. You can only see your own votes. Now, the thing is that might happen that you voted on the wrong element or you've changed your mind. So if you shift click, it'll take votes away from this sticky note. The other way to do that is I'm just going to add a vote. If you right click, you can remove or add a vote from the sticky note. And I just want to vote a couple of extra votes over here. The other thing that I want to point out that is important as a facilitator is the functionality that you have here at the top bar. So you can end the voting session, and you can also kind of keep track of what's happening with the votes. So for example, if I click on this drop down, you'll see that there's currently 2 users voting. So one is me, that's me, and then my clone sitting in another window also voting. So if I go in and I do a few votes here on the side, you'll see that there's actually votes counting down. And it's a great way to actually just keep track of how people are voting, because once everybody has voted, you can then end the voting session or encourage people to rethink. But then you can always come back in and see, if people are active or not actively voting. Just encourage them through the voting. So to end the voting session, it's very easy. You just go over here to the end voting session, click on that, and then it'll give you a results page. Now, here you can see that idea 2 has received most of the votes, 6 votes. And then as I scroll down, I can see that idea 1 and 3 has received 2 votes. And once you've done reviewing this result, and the results also pop up on the on the side for each of the participants, they can also view the results. And once you've discussed that, you can close that down and get rid of it. Now, as a facilitator, something that you can see though is the fact that and user, you can see that the voting sessions remain here. You can also get rid of it if you want more space. I'm just doing that as a demonstration, and now you're back to where you were. Now, let's say I want to go back and actually review that vote again. Just go back to the voting session over here. You can see the results page of a vote, and there you have it. All of your voting sessions will be listed down here, and you can go and review the votes that has happened before. It's nicely archived. The other thing that you can also do is you can also delete a voting session, and you can also show the votes. And that what happens with the show the votes is that you actually have now in the normal canvas all these little indicators here highlighted. What's nice about this indicator here is that it sizes up depending on how many votes it receives. So idea 2 in this example has received the most votes, and you'll see the little circle that indicates the votes are kind of larger than the other ones. You can deactivate that by saying hiding votes, and then finally you can also go and then delete the voting session and just get a warning there that you'll be deleting that permanently. But for now, I'll just keep that voting session going. So that is the voting feature. Super handy to kind of just test people's kind of feeling. You can also run it with your timer, of course, if you want to time box the voting session. And by all means, you can also use the voting session just to do a quick sense check in the session. You don't have to have all these formal voting elements going. It's really a feature there to help you as a facilitator gauge where people are going, what direction they're going. And then, of course, at the final round, you can also go and use it to make the final decision. So really interesting little feature, probably the one that people use the most when they start getting into the facilitation superpowers.